Memory transcription subject, Chief Hunter ISIF, Arxer Rebellion Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, February 21, 2137. When the United Nations contacted me after the summit, I expected to be chastised for my unannounced arrival, shirking Oleg and Lisa's watch. Instead, Secretary General Zhao offered to confide the secret he was keeping about the Arxer. The human was emphatic that this had to be kept under wraps, even from Felra, Kaisal, and anyone else in my inner circle. I landed a shuttle on the gorgeous world known as Earth, following the UN's landing beacon. It was a bit concerning to know the humans were officially in league with the herbivores, while we remained outside their organization. It wasn't clear if the speech the rodent pestered me into had made a difference, given that I hadn't heard from any governments except the Yodel. Tarva was notably quiet. Human soldiers steered me in through a separate entrance from the main one, though I found their cordial demeanors reassuring. It wasn't clear what the Secretary General felt needed to be passed along in person. I hoped the request for a face-to-face dialogue meant I was in the United Nations' good graces. My docile friend's most compelling argument for attending the summit had been that an effective rebellion required external military support. Our success hinged on how much the Terrans or their allies chipped into our cause. While it didn't suit me to beg like a leaf licker, I would attempt to gauge their war plans. Do humans view us as full allies? Unless they're crushing Alpha underfoot tomorrow, this revolution needs to be more than an afterthought. What could be a lock-and-key secret about the Arxer from the archives? I mused to my escorts, who only acknowledged my words with a twitch of their binocular eyes. We already know the truth about the conspiracy, yes? The humans clearly had been ordered to stay tight-lipped about the purpose of this visit, so I fiddled with my holopad while waiting for Zhao. The Secretary General strolled into the room within minutes, which suggested he'd been here in anticipation of my arrival. It was another positive sign that the leader of Earth respected my time. His personal guards were lax, further denoting that he no longer viewed me as a threat. The Terran dignitary extended his right arm, and I gripped it loosely in my own paw. A slight smile crossed his face, before he seated himself across from me. I'm not here to put you through the ringer, since the Duerten were no major loss. If I'm being honest, there were lots of groans among the diplomatic staff when we heard they were coming, Zhao chuckled. But frankly, ISIF, it wasn't a smart move on your part. You know how delicate it is, just for us to appease the herbivores. Felra seems to have a negative impact on your decision-making, while also failing to maintain decorum, and making you appear weak to your kin. She's been good for you, personally, but she's a negative influence on your judgment. She needs to go home. I flared my nostrils with indignation. I'm not going to ship my best friend back to Milo, gift-wrapped for the Kolshan occupiers. It was your people's idea to guilt me into rescuing her. General Jones miscalculated, in my humble opinion. Her intent was for you to tilt the scales at Milo, not to grab one doser and bolt. You're a great strategist, and you did need a push, but you've become distracted. You're not devoting your full energy to the movement. That'll cost you in the long run. I saved someone that is important to me. Jones wished to force me into openly rebelling, yes? Humanity has made no progress at Milo in months, so it seems bold to fling accusations at me for my selected engagements. You're correct to frown upon our progress, or lack thereof. The problem with Milo is we whittle down each other's drone forces, and the Kolshan send more to replace them, as quickly as us. It's become a competition of how fast we can slap new automatons together, and they have the advantage of being entrenched in the system already. If we commit resources from other key areas, that opens us up to an attack elsewhere. Perhaps what they're banking on. So humanity is more focused on keeping its current systems and counterattacking. Precisely. Every system we fail to protect reflects on us. The Duerten shield has been ineffectual. The whole of our industrial power can't go to one world. You need to intervene, whether for Felra's sake or for ours, give us an edge to make headway. It was undeniable that the Dosur didn't belong among Arxer. Her presence was hampering my interactions with the rebels serving under me, many of whom would never accept her. Felra never complained about her homeworld being occupied, but I'd noticed how happy she'd looked at the sight of Dosur summit delegates. I'd grown accustomed to having a friend to talk to. However, what was best for her was more important than her commitment, preventing me from being alone. No matter the distance, we could chat via SwiftPair like we'd done before meeting up. Humans manipulated me into intervening at Milo when the attack first began, but at least Zhao has the decency to outright ask without trickery. Felra's behavior has forced me into some altercations to defend her honor. It's truly not ideal. I'll consider it, but we've lent our resources to rescue various cattle, for nothing in return. I can't risk sustaining heavy losses without some guarantees and recompense, I responded. Spell out for me what comes next. Convince me that your cunning is truly enough to topple the Federation, once and for all. Zhao donned a cocky smirk. The Farsal are already out of commission. You and I both know they're not the military might of the Empire. They're schemers, meddlers, rewriters. The Kolshians are the ones with the secret army, and we have no idea of their full capabilities, but Alpha could be an impregnable fortress. They could well have an ace up their sleeve to play, but who said all our cards were on the table? There's 3 phases left in the war. The first is defense. Should the tables turn at Milo, I imagine the Kolshians are biding their time to hit human territory. We know they want to cure us, so I'd find the use of biological weapons against a civilian populace likely. Have you made any progress toward undoing this cure? It would be of use to the Arxer, as this disease would be lethal against us. Even with emergency use protocols, I can't see us having a genetic reversal inside of a year, especially with the life-or-death issues on our plate. We've been looking into this since learning about the omnivore manipulation from the late Nikonus, but knowing which human genes were targeted by the retrovirus, via a before and after, is insightful. It should accelerate our research progress a little. At least your kind can survive on vegetation, yes? I should hope your other 2 war phases aren't so dreadfully passive. It inspires minimal confidence. No, Isif, we're not content to sit back. The second phase is preventing the Kolshians' allies from joining the fray, since it's unfeasible to clash with hundreds of species. We keep them out of it, hitting any targets we can, and make it a fair fight. The third part then, of course, is an all-out assault on Alpha, and we take it inch by inch. We storm the planetary defense systems on their satellite like the landing at Normandy. Humanity must execute each of these phases simultaneously, and to perfection. You can't be everywhere all at once. But we can make them think we are. Realization struck me like a kick to the teeth. That was the strategy humanity wanted my rebellion to employ against the Dominion. It was an arduous illusion to pull off, but the psychological effects couldn't be understated. Leaving the enemy looking over their shoulder, expecting an ambush at each turn, was the classic strategy of the Arxer. Could the Terrans rattle the herbivores further than we had, with a more convincing rendition? I was intrigued to know how Zhao hoped to accomplish that, and whether I could replicate those strategies against Gizl. We've discussed the state of military affairs long enough. I'm sold that the humans are planning an attempt to stamp out the last of the Feds, in one grand push. Even the tireless Terrans can't keep up this pace of activity forever, can they? I'll draft a plan to retake Milo, but again, I expect some collaboration and aid, I decided. Now, I thought you summoned me here to impart something you found at the archives. Or was that a false pretense? Secretary General Zhao pursed his lips. I decided to tell you the truth, because I trust you and see you as an important ally. At the archives, we discovered a handful of Arxer kept in cryosleep, presumably preserved from long ago, in case the Farsal ever took another go at curing you. What? That's incredible. I would love for these Arxer to join me. That's part of why I hesitated to tell you. You see, After learning about what the Arxer once were, many of them have become despondent. I feel like we're treading the same path as the Farsal, too, telling your people that aliens kidnapped them, but not us. Except it's true, in this case. I don't follow. Knowing my own sadness to what we've lost as a culture, I do not see why humanity's role or their reaction to the present status quo would matter. ISIF, Earth providing asylum to vocal critics of betterment, several of whom opposed that very ideology in their day, would destroy what's left of our outward neutrality with the Dominion. If word got out through your people, or we accepted the scattered pleas from this lot to join UN forces, it would be problematic. Regardless, I'm not sure they want to sign on to your rebellion. They're leery, even of you, learning about the cruel practices and your history. Disappointment fogged my mind. Ah, I see. My own people think I am a monster. You don't want me to get the wrong idea about their allegiance, or spread the word about what Arxer used to be. I felt it would be wrong to deprive you of the opportunity to speak with the ancients. I know you want to restore your society to what it once was, and that mandates full knowledge of the changes that have transpired. If humanity has assessed that these people wish for nothing to do with me, I would respect that conclusion. After the ridicule at the summit, I do not need to speak to anyone who does not wish to speak to me. Relax. I've selected one of the Arxer who's taken the news in stride, and hasn't had a depressive episode. Her name is Vizith. She was open to speaking with you, if only to find out how you could do such things. Why would I wish to defend my entire life, Zhao? It is not as if I don't already know the full scope of my crimes. You want a reason to go through the trouble? One word, morality. Call it a foolish notion, but heeding moral principles is what gives you integrity. Without ethics, your movement is one bad actor away from returning to betterment's oppression. Vizith could show you what the Arxer stood for. I lashed my tail in frustration. When word from the archives confirmed empathy was prevalent in our past, I'd yearned to see it in action. After years of repressing my own defective leanings, it was difficult to understand how personal expression and interactions worked. Furthermore, I found myself defaulting to cruelty as the disciplinary crux that kept my subordinates in line. As much as I aspired to emulate the ideals of the past, I was at a loss for how to achieve that. Vizith could give me pointers on the proper bounds of morality. Maybe we could become more like humanity, through this conversation Zhao is facilitating. It's worth hearing what Vizith has to say. Very well. I leveled the human with a piercing stare, which he matched with his own brown eyes. If it helps return to the reason and honor that once guided us, I must do it. Peace for Arxer of the future, for every species among the stars, is what I desire, at any cost. Secretary-General Zhao stood, beckoning for me to follow. Humanity has that in common, ISIF. Meyer talked about coexistence, and I champion protecting Earth, but it goes beyond both of those noble goals. If we vanished from the Milky Way tomorrow, I'd like for people to say we left the galaxy a better place than we found it. I know they will not say that about me. I have perpetrated too much tragedy. For what it's worth, it's my belief that history will be kinder to you than you imagine. The primate led me through a narrow corridor, which was cramped for my wider, taller form. Had I not been slouching, I would not fit upright within the dreary hallway. Arxer posture proved beneficial in this instance, as we ducked into an observation room that opened through Zhao's retinal scan. I stalked up to the window, curious for a peek at Vizith. The female Arxer was seated across from a blonde human, who was playing some paper rectangle game with her. The glass was one way, while security monitors also captured the scene. Zhao approached a microphone, switching it on. Testing. Vizith, can you hear me? Are you ready to talk to the rebel leader I told you about? Yes, the huntress answered. In the interest of parity, I think we should trade questions. This ISIF figure can start. Swallowing with nervousness, I took Zhao's spot by the intercom. It's a pleasure to speak with you. May I ask whether you were around during the Fourth World War? I was more than around. I could have gone into politics, run for a small local office, but I served my country's military to oppose the genocidal maniacs that wanted to conquer the world and cull their own. My turn. If betterment culled the good people, how could someone like you even exist? Blending in. You can't fully erase defectiveness, their word, from the gene pool. Assuming you have empathetic traits, which I gather from your speech, you would be put down today. Rest assured, I do not engage in such practices. Yes, how reassuring that you felt the need to specify that. I don't get how the bloc could have gotten away with killing people, without an uproar from friends and family. Nobody fought back. Uproar, you had friends and family who cared about you? Normal Arxer did? Is that really your question? If I posited it to you in the interrogative, I suppose it is. By that logic, you asking why nobody fought back was an extraneous question. I'm astounded by how rigid and literal you are. I was expressing my shock that you people just let risks rot. Even less social Arxer cared about their families, and had a few people to share their subjects of interest with. It seems impossible to have a functioning society without any connection. It's no wonder you have no conscience. With how self-conscious I was speaking to others, the criticism of my phraseology would have been enough to make me clam up, before Visith lambasted me as devoid of empathy. My conscience was why I shied away from talking food to begin with. Despite my efforts to oppose betterment, this huntress viewed me with unfettered hostility. It was difficult enough that the rest of the galaxy saw us as irredeemable monsters. To hear such rhetoric from my own kind needled shame deep within me. Secretary-General Zhao knitted his brows with concern, and seemed to weigh terminating the exchange. I was surprised when the human placed an oily palm on my shoulder, a quiet gesture of support. Visitha's verbal attacks drew disappointment from Earth's leader, who'd hoped she would serve as a moral lighthouse to guide me through murky waters. I stepped away from the microphone, to deliberate a better angle to approach the investigation. The human dignitary started back down the corridor, sighing heavily. A knock sounded from within Visitha's room, coming from a separate entrance to her chamber. The blonde Terran accompanying the Arxer leapt to his feet with a baffled expression, and propped the door open. My deflated demeanor was replaced by curiosity, prompting me to squint. The face on the other side of the threshold was Gojid, belonging to an individual the humans clearly weren't expecting. The primates displayed concern at the newcomer's arrival. If my fellow predators were worried, that could mean the herbivore was a threat to Visitha's welfare. I gazed upon the hate-filled eyes of the Gojid, and waited to see what his next move would be. It was clear the humans didn't think this spiky visitor had come with peaceful intentions. Memory transcription subject, Captain Sovlin, United Nations Fleet Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, February 21, 2137. Tyler attempted to slam the door in my face, but I drove my shoulder into it with force that could only stem from passion. The memories of stabbing my claws into an Arxer's neck on Silas, while trying to save Marcel, were fresh. Everything that had gone wrong in my life started and ended with the Greys. The reason I tortured the kind-hearted human was because I equated Earth's sapient predators with these child-eating, reptilian abominations. My daughter's screams, as she was eaten alive, echoed in my ears, and uncontrollable hatred blacked out any judgment. "What the fuck are you doing here? You're only authorized to accompany Hunter," Tyler exclaimed. The blonde human made a move to intercept me, but I ducked under his grasp. The Arxer at the table hadn't reacted to defend itself, and it looked more alarmed than ferocious. I could see Terran playing cards on the table in front of it. How could Tyler, my friend, have been indulging in a game with these savages? The two primates who were duped into bringing me here drew their weapons, though Officer Cardona urged them to stand down. Just as I came within striking distance of the Grey, shadows flashed in my periphery. A massive, scarred Arxer tackled me away from the one at the table, a growl rumbling in its throat. It had the clear opportunity for the death blow, but it had purposefully not driven its claws into my flesh. Rather than pinning me with its superior weight, it released its grip and gestured for me to stand. The beast's body tilted forward, arms raised in a fighting stance. It baffled me why it hadn't used its fangs to draw my blood. Was it toying with the prey that wandered into its den? "Stand down, humans," the Arxer barked. "I can handle myself. Captain Sovlin, we have not met before, yes? I am the one you want, not Visith. She was born long before any of the war atrocities happened." An ajar door informed me that this newcomer predator had burst in from an observation room, where a recognizable human face was watching the scene unfold. It was the Secretary-General of the United Nations himself, giving a filthy monster a tour fresh off the summit. Zhao looked silently livid, striding into the room in a hurried attempt to defuse the situation. The name the Terran referred to the Grey Demon as was Isif, which rang a bell. The primates were consorting with the chief hunter that terrorized Gojids, forgetting all of its sins because it saved Earth? This ugly bastard is directly responsible for Hania's fate. I'm going to rend it from limb to limb. It underestimates just how much I want it dead. Visith stood from the table, lashing its tail. "Why don't we talk about whatever the issue is? It's dishonorable to trade claws without provocation. Besides, I would love a chance to speak with an alien other than the leaf lickers do not see you as worth talking to. We're monsters that deserve death to them," Isif hissed. "With what the Arxer have become now, I can understand where they're coming from. I never would have imagined we'd eat and torture people. That's something that's burdened me my entire life. Why do you think I'm letting Sovlin have a swing at me? I do not need outside assistance, which would make me look weak. Go on, Gojid, do your worst." My bones ached from the force of its tackle, but I stood with renewed determination. This Arxer was mocking me, assuming I couldn't scratch it. The Terrans were foolish if they bought this mechanical, staged profession of guilt from the monster that led the raids. I shrieked, swiping straight at Isif's eyes. Its tail hooked around my legs, while I was mid-swing, and sent me crashing to my rump. It waited with patience, heartless eyes facing me as cold slits. My spines bristled, sickened by the predatory visage. Isif seemed to be treating this skirmish as recreation, the glint in its eyes reminding me of how Tyler looked, playing his murderous video games. In my youth, my movements might have been a bit more spry, but my ankles were throbbing from the tail swipe. I could acknowledge that the monster had a grasp on its hunger, enough to calculate and wait rather than act in a frenzy. That necessitated a more measured response on my part, despite the fog of fury spurring me onward. "Lost your nerve already?" the chief hunter prompted. I raised my claws in defiance. "Bloodthirsty, rotten, unfeeling fiend. I want you dead, dead as the fucking children you ate alive. You stole my family." Creeping forward with purposeful steps, I kept all of the Arxer's offensive weapons in my peripheral vision. It had to keep its repulsive pupils focused on me, which made it obvious where it was looking. When its gaze flicked downward, I hopped over the blistering tail sweep that followed. The Grey balanced itself, swinging an arm at my head. I landed just in time to duck, and pop back up to swipe its snout. Crimson-red blood, the same iron-rich color as the humans, spurted from its nostrils. The UN soldiers looked ready to intervene, treacherously worried when I drew the Grey's blood. "Stop attacking Isif at once." "That's an order, Sovlin," Zhao growled, his own brown eyes narrowed in predatory fashion. I darted out of Isif's range, daring him to come to me. "Fuck you. The Greys are animals, existential threats. This is why you weren't supposed to know any of this," Tyler shouted. "You can't control yourself or be trusted with any info involving the Arxer. The Federation started all of this, we can prove they weren't always like this." "I don't care. You have never understood how they deserve to writhe. Their words, their past, their supposed change of heart, it doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter. Isif bared its savage fangs, instruments of death which evolved for the sole purpose of dissecting sinew and crunching bone. The monster pounced toward me, jaws wide open. The terror of being eaten made me slow to react, disgusted by the carnivore's gaping maw revealing the accrual of filthy drool. Its teeth were impossibly sharp, digging into my throat with painful force. The gray was applying the maximum pressure it could without puncturing my vulnerable flesh. It relaxed its grip for a moment, long enough to throw me into a pin on the ground. Its fangs were then back at my throat, bringing my prey instincts to full-fledged panic. The last of my control poured into not flailing, which would risk Isif piercing my neck. The chemical surge was a blinding hysteria, sensory input was nauseating, with the reeking predator grasping me within its fangs like a meal. I didn't want to die the way my daughter had, dissected in slow fashion to savor the cruelty. The Arxer were evil creatures incapable of containing their hunger, and this moment proved it. Despite all of this, the idle humans were watching, as if they thought the scene was within acceptable limits of behavior. Perhaps they were scared to interfere with a gray's catch, or perhaps I was wrong to trust their benevolence. Wasn't I always worried about Terrans siding with the Arxer over us? Was all the secrecy because they're throwing us to the grays, colluding with Isif above creatures with any redeeming features? Isif placed an uncanny eye inches away from one of mine. I do not want to hurt you. If I did, we would not be having this conversation. Are you understanding my words yet? An Arxer knows when they've been bested, when to admit defeat. Kill me, you fucking monster. A stutter lapsed into my voice from the dizzying pull of adrenaline, but I clung to my hatred in the face of certain death. Savor the act, like the predator you are. It can feel good to engage in acts of aggression, but I derive no pleasure from needless suffering. Survival is not a choice, it's an imperative commanded by biology outside our control. The societal confines under the Dominion mandated horrible actions. Evil is not natural, it is gradual, hardened by time and birth of ideas. It is a phenomenon of sapience, not predation. Only predators eat people. You lost the right to call yourself sapient with the first child's carcass you munched on. I am sorry for every meal I've ever had. I had no choice. So while objective fault cannot be assigned in such circumstances, my conscience assigns guilt all the same. It is unforgivable. That's why you must die, scum. Were I not vital to the efforts for a peaceful future, I would agree with your assessment. By your own words about the right to be deemed sapient, Vizith has not lost her status, she never ate any creature with soffents in her life. She was rescued from the archives, and her people might as well have been a different species. They welcomed you, as the humans would have, and like humanity, their civilians were killed for it. Direct your anger at me. The Arxer, for an unfathomable reason, opened its jaws, and allowed me to crawl away on the floor. Why would it spare defenseless prey, when it could literally taste my flesh on its tongue? Perhaps it was deceiving the humans, who clearly trusted it enough to let it place its gross, chipped fangs on my throat. It had more control than I'd anticipated from a vile gray, but I didn't buy for 1 second that their species was different in the past. The Federation brought out a viciousness that was their existing inclination. No worthwhile race could have hunted other civilizations like they had. The UN soldiers bound my wrists, as though I were the criminal. Tyler and Zhao both stared at me with disapproval. While I had disobeyed direct orders and trespassed, it had proven that their secret actions were reprehensible. It was tough to believe they'd pulled Vizith from a cryopod, and deemed it ethical to keep the ancient Arxer out of my purview. I risked my life on that mission to help the Earthlings. I had the same right to know as anyone else. The humans crafted too many excuses for the Grey's behavior, and their continued cooperation with these tormentors was unacceptable. Tyler breathed a flustered sigh. I was supposed to keep Vizith company, Sovlin. She's a guest, and she's not dangerous. You can't be questioning our judgment, and poking your nose where it doesn't belong. I'm tired of you treating the Arxer like genuine people. I spat. They're not. You know what? Either you sit and talk to Vizith like an adult, or I'll have you charged for insubordination. Your pick. As if I'd ever care what a Grey has to say. My decision is self-evident. Zhao tapped his chin. Do you think the Arxer are evil? Of course I do. You humans can't even say that word. What the Dominion have done is evil, but that's why they're sapient. It takes intention and knowledge to be malicious. Animals just exist, unbeholden to our morality. The capacity for good and evil are adjacent to one another. Oh, I get it, you think you see yourselves in them. They are way different. Humans might have had savage outliers in your past, but it wasn't your whole fucking society. That's the problem with outliers. Left unchecked, you realize one day that they've become your whole society, in plain sight. I opened my mouth to argue, but my treacherous thoughts turned to how easily the Federation ensnared countless societies in its web of lies. Our entire society was disingenuous, and the loudest voices all had called to slaughter the peace-seeking humans. Secretary-General Zhao's words boasted the conviction of truthfulness, and Carlos' old lesson from the Battle of Silas rang in my ears. That's the belief that makes monsters of us all. Nobody has empathy for someone that is too unalike. When the dots connected before my eyes, that the Arxer had en masse been convinced that aliens weren't people, I couldn't deny that it fit with true evil. The humans viewed the Grey's trajectory as a knowing, purposeful decline into depravity. Where I wanted to find a monster beyond comparison, I saw the Federation mirrored. Both parties were to blame for what happened to my family, and for that, they were irredeemable. I hated that I'd served for years beneath the Federation's banner, fighting for their causes, as much as I loathed the carnivorous creatures in this cell. Perhaps the Arxer were once capable of a slight semblance of civilization, since their decline had to start from something that wasn't this abominable. The Kolshians contacted those demons as sapients, and by Nikona's own admission, starved them soon after. Maybe Vizith is capable of restraining her bloodthirsty instincts, because unlike the humans, Arxer certainly possess those. Isif was drooling, and the brutality in the Grey's mess hall on that cattle ship. Zhao pointed a hand to the table. We want peace. Make your choice, be a part of that vision, or refuse and help the Federation and the Dominion keep us in this cycle of death. Tyler seemed surprised, as I gave the ultimatum genuine consideration. The ancient Arxer had returned to its spot at the table, watching me with an unblinking stare that seemed to x-ray my skeleton. Isif's pupils darted between me and Vizith, perhaps regretting relinquishing a gojid prey to fatten itself up. No doubt both Greys had cued in on my vulnerable areas and fleshiest organs the second I stepped into the room. There was no depth of emotion when I peered deeper into those terrible eyes, unlike when I'd gazed into Marcel's from my jail cell. The Arxer were soulless predators incapable of kindness, their exteriors had zero cues that didn't scream cold-blooded killing machine. Still, as suicidal as it seemed on an instinctual level, the debt I owed to the UN compelled me to comply with Zhao's urgings. My feet shuffled toward the table with hesitancy, feeling instinctive disgust and apprehension swell within my chest. Every neuron summoned the impulse to run away from the ravenous beast, who I couldn't hope to best with my arms still chained. Vizith drummed its claws on the table. Your visit was most insightful, Isif. I'd like to speak to Sovlin alone, and not while being watched like some zoo exhibit. I do not know this zoo word, is that a term of the human lexicon? Isif asked. No. It's Morvim, like all my other words. Since your language has been dead for many centuries, my knowledge is negligible. I must research this zoo concept, perhaps my human friends can aid me. I'll leave you to be, Vizith. The chief hunter departed from the observation door it came from with Zhao, while the ancient Arxer looked mistrustful of the modern predator that had schooled me. Then again, I suppose I was being foolish to assign any emotion to a Grey's countenance. However, it was an undeniable fact that Vizith waited for Isif to be out of earshot to address me directly. The carnivore gestured for Tyler to retake his seat, and it tended to the playing cards it had abandoned. The blonde human watched me with disbelieving eyes, relaxing his posture for the first time since I barged in. I can't begin to express my shock, waking up to find the genocidal Northwest Block 1, and that the galaxy sees my entire race as people-eating monsters, Vizith hissed. We were fascinated by the idea of aliens. I guess betterment has bred out all curiosity too. Your behavior is unhinged, Sovlin, but I agree that these Arxer are beyond saving. They are no longer recognizable. No longer people. I recoiled at how smooth and reproachful the Grey's speech was. How could your society ever have had meaningful differences from today? For starters, we cared about each other. Social and non-social Arxer managed different roles in society, being on opposite ends of the spectrum, but we respected the contributions of both types. At least in my nation. The Northwest Bloc wanted to destroy the Morvim Charter though, and we feared the war would kill us all. That might have been better than losing to those megalomaniacs. I am so unspeakably horrified by everything the humans say we've done since then. Why would you care? Because, they made thinking people cattle, and wiped out entire societies. So many needless deaths, whole generations born into war, and no freedom of expression? Betterment has become so comically villainous, with the titles and hunting obsessions, that it's not even funny. They didn't use those titles back in your day? Know your savageness? Tyler commented. They would have been a mockery if they did. What's admirable about not landing a clean kill, choosing cruelty over honor? Anyhow, I got abducted by the Farsal on a mission to Kissium, a neutral state the Bloc invaded in their quest for power. I was enlisted as a soldier against those bastards, and I wanted to stop them from hurting innocent civilians, not watch them carry out atrocities in the stars. I struggled to meet the beast's eyes. Arxer hunters ate my daughter alive. I offer my sincere condolences, that must have been wretched to go through. I'll have you know I would never do anything like that. The Arxer I knew would never commit such vile murders, because it's unthinkable. It must baffle you that we could have ever been anything else, after witnessing such a graphic and personal atrocity. This is a nightmare of epic proportions to me too. Imagine how you would feel, finding your own species in such diabolical straits centuries later. Even with the gravelly register, the content of this beast's words seemed more like a human speech pattern than that of a terrorizing predator. It was worlds apart from Koth or even Isif. I would have never imagined that an Arxer could put such eloquent, civilized sentences together. Deciding to humor the carnivore, I engaged in the thought exercise. If the Gojids went on to hunt the races of the Federation in gruesome fashion, I would feel like 10 times greater of a monster than when we were revealed to be omnivores. What could be more appalling than seeing your species reduced to mindless, hated savages, with its worst members from your time in charge? I couldn't bear to see the Gojids committing such heinous acts. I shared a glance with Tyler, and picked up on the flash of agreement in his eyes. The human had wanted me to empathize with an Arxer's plight. I'd mourn what my species used to be, Vizith. I imagine that's what you're doing. The predator lowered her reptilian eyes. Yes, I suppose I am. Against all odds, I'd survived one Arxer's jaws, and was engaged in decent conversation with another. A part of me wondered if things could have been different, had savagery not overtaken their entire society. Could carnivores have conducted themselves like any other species? The humans had seen something more than malicious monsters from the outset, and with Vizith slashing down my preconceptions, it was tough to claim the primates didn't have a case. For the first time in my life, I spotted a tinge of sapience in the galaxy's original predators.